Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis Show. On this episode, man, I'm excited. A good friend of mine that has got a lot of stories that are fun, but they're educational too. I mean, they're not just stories that are out there, but they're stories that are valuable, and that's what's going to be fun. Dan Vega, man, is joining us. A serial entrepreneur is my best coined phrase to refer to you. Dan, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to jump into it, man. The serial entrepreneur, and where did that's I like to refer to it as spirit, sometimes juice, that I want to build things and and just build the next thing and the next thing. Where'd that come from, man? When did that start?
Well, as you know, a lot of entrepreneurs will be like, well, I was an entrepreneur at 6 and I sold lemonade. And of course, we all did those things, mowed lawns. But honestly, I think where it really started for me is when I was like 17, 18, I tried like 2 jobs. I went to work for Bass Pro Shops, the world headquarters, and I was a stock boy filling stuff for their catalog. And that lasted like 3 months. I'm like, I can't do this. And then I literally was deboning chickens at a chicken factory. So I tried 2 jobs and I'm like, I'm out. This isn't for me. So I'm just geared a certain way of like somebody telling me when to wake up, when I have to be somewhere, when I can go to the bathroom, when I'm supposed to eat. It just doesn't work for me. So I think around 18 and a half, I started my first legitimate company and kind of never looked back, I guess.
What was that? Was that in that like a rebellious thing? Is that what you think it was? It was like, you ain't telling me what to do, or is it more of a, I just
No,
kind of want to do my own thing?
I think it was the latter. When I was in high school, I was a terrible student, by the way. I was like straight, if I got D minuses across the board, I was like, yes. My parents were like, where are we celebrating? But it wasn't because I couldn't do the work. I just didn't engage. My home life was disrupted, but I remember I was always in trouble at school. But my dean, for some reason, he really liked me, and he pulled me aside. I was in 11th grade, so I'm 17 or something, and he pulls me aside and he says, man, you're so talented, you're so smart. You have to really start applying yourself. Have you applied to any universities? And I'm like, nah, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to kind of go my own way. And he's like, look, I got to tell you, he's like, obviously you're not going to get into any real universities, but you should go to a trade school, do something like that. And I'm like, nah, I appreciate your concern, and I know it's coming from a good place, but I think I'm going to try my own thing. And he kept trying to convince me, and he says, I'm going to tell you for a 100% fact, college is definitely the key to success. And I asked him, I said, did you go to college? He says, I sure did. So I said, again, I know it's coming from a great place. He was a great guy, but I'm going to go my own way. And he literally said, I got to tell you, man, you frustrate me. You're either going to be pumping gas somewhere or a millionaire. There's no in between with you. And I thought about it, I said, I'll take those odds. So I kind of always knew that was probably where I was going to end up.
You mentioned the first, entrepreneurial adventure. Was it what you thought it would be? Like, did you have that sense of freedom and those different aspects that you were hoping for, or was it kind of that rude awakening that a lot of people get in that first venture?
Well, I think it was in the middle. It was a rude awakening to the amount of work. I think sometimes we underestimate the work as an entrepreneur. We're so vision based.
But it's like we don't want to work 40 hours, 40 hours a week, 9 to 5 somewhere. Then you want to work 100 hours a week for yourself.
Yeah, not to do.
Wait, this is the choice I made.
Yeah, but I was having a lot of fun. I didn't have any much business education. I was fortunate enough to have good mentors, and my very first mentor was this guy named Victor Stevens. He was raised in the bayous of Louisiana. He was my dad's best friend, and my dad was kind of a rough character. So I went to Victor after I graduated high school, and I said, look, man. He's like, Danny, what are you going to do with your life, boy? I said, I don't know, man. He says, how much capital could you get your hands on? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like capital, I'm not familiar with the term. And he's like, money, man. I said, none. Like, I don't have money. and he's like, could you put your hands on $300? I'm like, yeah, I could probably come up with $300. He's like, come up with $300, call me, I'm gonna help you start a business. So my first business was buying and selling used equipment, vacuum cleaners, buffers, floor strippers, that kind of deal. And I would run ads in the newspaper and I would show it out of a storage unit, you know what I mean? And I literally started making like 10 grand a month right away. And I just had a knack for it. And back then I think minimum wage was like $3.35. And from there, it's like I sold that business and found better mentors, and kind of the rest is history.
You said you had a knack for it. Was that the sales aspect or the tinkering aspect? Because I could see either way you could be successful with one of those two, or was it both for you?
So naturally, I'm a little bit analytical, and I'm more detail oriented. But I learned the people skills over time. So naturally, it was more about processes for me, and risk reward ratios and calculating risk and figuring out margins. That is my gift. However, over time, I had to learn the people business, and you realize people do business with the people they know, like, and trust. So hey, I'm gonna have to figure out that part. So.
And that's what I was going to ask about, or going to ask about now, is how you shifted into that, because when you have that initial success, like that small business, because I can just kind of picture driving around, getting the vacuum, getting the buffer, cleaning them up a little bit, and then selling them. And now all of a sudden you're getting more than you can drive around and pick up and or deliver. So how did you overcome that holy crap, I'm having success obstacle?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Actually, I had like 2 storage units and then 3, and then I had a guy helping me, and it became crazy. And eventually I opened a retail store back when I think brick and mortar made a lot of sense for something like that. And and then I ran that for a couple of years. I brought in a partner eventually, and then we sold it. And then I started thinking a lot about, so I got into more of like franchises, different products. And then eventually I had this realization of my gift became not only processes, but I was running the sales meetings every day. And I was just a nut when it came to reading books and studying. And that was the part that I really liked, is running the guys, right? Running the sales meetings. And eventually I thought, well, why sell a product or service? I can just be out there and doing that part and selling education, and I got into the seminar business.
So how did you handle bringing people in? I mean, that's probably the scariest thing that you do, as an entrepreneur in that first business, because that's where you broke all the bad habits of being, the high school kid.
Sure.
Now you've got people working with you, for you, all these other responsibilities. How did you find that first guy, maybe?
Honestly, I was reading a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
So every little issue I ran into, I would go try to find a book, because I didn't have a lot of that guidance at first. But I was fortunate enough to just run into some good mentors. I have I've always been I've had a high inertia when it comes to mathematics. Mm-hmm. And I think that got me on the radar of some really great people that, wanted to kind of take an interest in me and mentor me. And to me, I was killing it. I was making a lot of money for a guy my age, and they were like, this is like small time. Like, you need to get in the real business. And it was a tough transition of trusting, the process of letting go what I was doing and kind of following their lead. And then from that point on, most of my mentors were at least 3 times my age. So they were writing books. They're in the seminar business. But it didn't take too long to see their results. And then I'm like, okay, I'll listen. They got this figured out. But so in the beginning, I was kind of on my own,
What was it like, I guess, working with the older mentors and measuring yourself to them, but then also not wanting to compare yourself too much, because obviously, that can create its own pitfalls, but then still wanting to use them as the inspiration, wanting to do what they're doing. How did you balance that without driving yourself crazy?
That's a great question. It was difficult because I came from a neighborhood that was a pretty tough neighborhood in Los Angeles, and all my it was heavy African American, Latino. It was a pretty tough neighborhood, and mostly broken families. And I remember as I started listening to these guys and really trying to learn and do the work, you're going to lose friends over it. All the neighborhood kids were like, "Who are you trying to be?" "Okay, Mr. Tony Robbins." Like, they turned on me, and it was like, "What are you guys doing? We're friends." But they hated it that I was trying to elevate myself out of the gutter, so to speak. And but eventually, I just, one of the mentors, I remember him saying, because I almost quit like the mentoring part of it, and he said, "Look, I know your friends. They have good intentions, maybe, or they're this or that. But if you want what they have, then listen to them, and they'll tell you how to get it. But if you want what other people have, like us, in terms of results, you need to listen to us. And no offense to even your family, but the advice that you're getting is not qualified. And so you need to listen to more qualified advice." And I just looked at again. I think about everything in mathematical terms. So I think about causality and cause and effect, and I'm like, reaction, right? It's fitting always to the action, and I'm like, their lives are rough and hard and terrible, and these guys have it really figured out. Not just financially, but when it comes to their family, their faith, and balance, they really had it figured out. So, it wasn't too hard of a decision to figure out who to listen to.
After the decision, though, how was that first month? Because that's kind of what I'm picturing is, like you said, you got all your buddies that are kind of trying to pull you down. You got the mentors trying to pull you up. Yeah, you could, like you said, you do the math. It's like, okay, well, this one makes sense. That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy first few months, though. So what was that like?
Yeah, it wasn't as difficult as I'm the type of person, as soon as I make up my mind and it's my decision, like this is what I'm going to do, I don't care too much about what other people are saying. So from that point on, it was easier. Now, again, underestimating the amount of work, you kind of think like, well, I got these mentors that are millionaires and everything they do works. And just by proximity of being around them, I'm sure it's going to be, I'm going to be this great success. And that obviously doesn't happen. You have to be open, and there's a lot of work and there's a lot of learning, and then you got to execute. And that's the problem, I think, where most people have an issue is understanding and comprehending all the strategies and all the lessons that a mentor teaches you is one thing, but being able to execute is something else. And they're not going to go out of their way to make sure you execute. It's up to us to go in and say, look, how do you do this? Why is this happening? Why am I running into this resistance? What is going on? How do you fix this? You know what I mean? And hopefully they'll be gracious enough to give it the answer. So it was a little bit of an uphill battle for the first 6 or 8 months, but I was fortunate enough to find my way quite young.
What was that first stumbling block where you hit the wall and it was like, man, do I get out the sledgehammer or do I turn around and go back?
I'd have to say after about a year of this new trajectory that I was on, my parents finally called it quits and said, hey, we're going to get a divorce. So, and of course we know that success comes in seasons, right? Sometimes you got certain seasons, but throughout my life, what I've noticed, it's never because I couldn't, I've had these walls, as you say, hit these walls. It was never because what I was doing was so difficult or I couldn't figure it out or I didn't have the right guidance. It was usually because I allowed external factors to affect me more than they should have affected me, and I lost my focus. Right? So family situation, I kind of feel like most people will define success at least 5 or 6 elements, right? So some people will say faith, family, financial independence is one aspect, giving back, whatever those elements are to a person. But what's interesting is, you could be a good, faithful person and a good family man, right? But if something happens with, let's say, one of your children, all these other things will go down. It's going to affect you. So you have to get good at compartmentalizing and saying, look, this catastrophe and this other aspect of my life is happening. However, I can't do anything about it. Like I can't control something that's not in my control. I have to focus over here. That's a difficult thing and a real discipline that we have to learn. So I think majority of the times when I've hit those walls, again, it was because of external factors and just life circumstances that got in the way, and I allowed it to affect me more than it should have.
That's always a tough lesson to learn because, you know, you fall into that woe is me and you know, I'm living this terrible life. You know, I got this scar, look at this pain, look at this. And you just want to sit back and soak it up. Was it just determination? I mean, because I'm really curious on this because, you know, a lot of people that's the block that stops them. It really is. Whatever, you know, whatever factor it may be, sick, parents getting a divorce, a relative sick, you know, the crash in 2008, whatever those things are that are out of their control. There's a lot of people that allow that to stop them. And so what was the catalyst? What was the, you know, was it one of your mentors that threw out a safety line and pulled you or what?
Yeah, I think it was probably, and you probably talked about this a million times on the show, but I think it's really having a very definitive why. At that time, my little brother was only 11 years old, and my mom was going through, with the divorce, she was going through a severe depression because I think my dad was the love of her life, but he had a lot of substance problems, and she just couldn't do it anymore. And so it was like, wow, I gotta take care of the family, you know. And that was the thing that would get me out of bed every morning and drive me, is primarily having an 11-year-old brother that needs some guidance and direction. And we got to the point where we were eating eggs and potatoes 3 meals a day, all, you know what I mean? It was like, whoa, this is emergency mode. I think the other thing is just the greater of the lesser of the two evils. So, you know, I look at certain things that are difficult, like let's say picking up a phone and doing sales calls or going out and doing face-to-faces. That can be very uncomfortable and there's a lot of discomfort. But then I look down the road of driving a car with no freaking air and can't roll down the window at the drive-through. You know, I got to open the door, right? Or you know, not living where I want to live in these terrible places and not having, you know, insurance and not being able to do that. So even though this current task or action scares the crap out of me, or there's a lot of discomfort that comes with it that I don't want to do, I look at all these other discomforts and I'm like, yeah, I'll go ahead and pick up the phone. So I look at the lesser of the two evils. I'm like, this is a small price to pay to be able to change, you know, that future. So
one thing I'm really curious about, and not maybe you've thought about this, maybe not, but you know, talking about how important the why is, and you know, use the example of your younger brother. One thing that came to mind for me is that sometimes, depending on what the why is or who the why is, it's something that can be outside of your control. Like, for instance, and I don't know you or your brother's story in this sense, but you wanted to take care of him, and then he makes bad choices and goes down a path where it's like, I got the money to take care of him, but now he's making these bad choices, and that outcome is no longer inside my control. So how do you balance finding that why, but then making sure it's something that's still inside of your control? Because I don't know, that's what's coming to mind for me, is the amount of people out there that's like, you want to take care of them, but then you might not be able to, and it's outside your control. So if you tie that as your why, then it could drive you crazy.
Yeah, I think in this situation when I was younger with my little brother, he was young enough to where any guidance that I gave him, he was going to follow. However, you make a really good point, because throughout the years of my career, I've had other whys. And some of those whys, you know, it's kind of, and a lot of them were partners or friends that I partnered with that I wanted to really help. And I kind of have because you can get derailed pretty quick. I kind of have a rule, you know, I don't mind pushing somebody down the road of success and nudging them and behind them and pushing them towards success. But the day that I find out that I'm pulling them on my back and they're kicking and screaming and I want their success more than they do, you have to be out. You know, the saying, of course, we all know, you can lead a horse to water, can't make them drink. I used to find myself dunking their heads in the water saying, drink, man, what are you doing? You're dehydrated. And it just doesn't work. So, and the problem is not only disconnecting from these people and finding a new why, but it's doing it guilt-free, because the type of person I am, I would take that guilt to the pillow. And I would be like, man, I can't believe, what's he gonna do without me? Like, this guy has no hope. Like, it would really affect me, and he has a family and all that. But at the same time, if they don't want success, you can't force them. And I'm also using my time to help someone that's not ready yet. And I could be using that time to help someone that's really close to having their moment, that is ready. So it's difficult. You do have to redefine your why quite frequently to make sure that it's, you know, it's important enough that it's going to help you withstand the pain and discomfort. Because I think a great trait of any entrepreneur is somewhat becoming comfortable with discomfort, because we're going to endure so much heat, especially in a startup, and so much, you know, nosebleeds and knocks in the head, and it's discouraging. So we have to become somewhat comfortable with discomfort and make sure that our why is the right one.
So where did this, and maybe this is more of a rhetorical question, but where did that, you have this heart to serve, and you know, because you talked about that why of your baby brother, and you know, and helping them, and then you started the seminar business, which is helping people, you know, having more success and pulling people along, and or really kind of nudging them, I think is a better way that you describe it.
Sure.
Prefer the nudge rather than the pull. What was the foundation of that? You know, that desire to really give back to people?
You know, honestly, I think in my case, some of it came from my environment and upbringing. You know, my father was a very abusive, great, brilliant, smart guy, but he had a lot of demons and basically PTSD of what we know now. And so he was, you know, he'd start drinking at a certain point in the day, and he got very mean and abusive, verbally, physically, and every way else. And so I think when you grow up in that environment, and of course many people have gone through this, you develop a little bit of a superhero complex. You know, so I'm always trying to buffer. I'm 12 years old, running in the front room, trying to play referee, or trying to get my mom out of the house so I can take the brunt of the abuse, or protecting my little brother and making sure he's out of the house. And I think that sticks with you, people that have been raised in that environment, and sometimes to your detriment, because you want to save everybody. And sometimes at the expense of yourself. You spread yourself too thin where you just can't give anymore. I think the other thing, now I will say I did go through a phase, because I started having some pretty good success in my 20s, late 20s. And all the naysayers, it's never been about the money for me, but there was a period of time where, you know, all these naysayers are telling you you're not going to make it. I'm like, okay, you're going to see what I pull up in your freaking driveway. I'm going to pull up in a Lambo in your driveway. You know, so you buy the big houses and the stuff because you're trying to prove something, and you're still basically insecure, and you're trying to fill that void, right? And prove to people who you are. And that was a phase, but now it's like, who cares? I don't want to prove anything anymore. I just want to be happy and help others. And I think too, you know, like I have some friends that have, you know, endless, pretty much unlimited resources. And I ask them, how much money do you have? They say, I have no idea. How would I know that? Like, well, I'll never spend but they're still working, and they're not working for money. There's no finite amount of like, when I get this much, I'm done. I think that's kind of a selfish position, right? And I'm not trying to say that the middle class is selfish, but most of the time when you think about the middle class, there's a finite number of like, when I make this much, I'm good. Me and my family are set, and I'm done, right? However, if everybody lived that way, we wouldn't have, you know, a lot of the nonprofits and a lot of the great causes that we have today. And you know, so I think that you know, we're truly working for impact and just helping others at this point. It's not about the money, but I think it probably stems early on from my upbringing, honestly.
That's one thing, and I this is something I'm definitely still going through as an entrepreneur, and I think it's something that I'm sure every entrepreneur goes through, is that because it's a business, your success is at least partially tied to money. That it's, even if you're, you have that self-confidence in your business plan or something, if you don't get the investors, if you don't make the sales, it feels like you weren't successful in that sense. And, or frankly, also, if you go out of business like that, then you weren't successful in that in a lot of ways. And, it's almost like the way people talk about it, it's almost like there's this tipping point of, you make a certain amount of money and then it's like, oh, okay, now it doesn't matter. But I mean,
Yeah,
frankly,
sure.
that's a crappy solution for this. So I want to throw that over to you, Dan. What is your wisdom on that, to help, I guess myself and other young entrepreneurs out there who are trying to remove that tie of success to money for a business?
So I don't think you learn this until, it takes a long time to learn this lesson, but realistically, at the end of the day, it's about providing value to others. I think I had to push through a lot of barriers, and eventually, just because of time and endurance and the right guidance, I eventually became successful. But I think I would have done it a lot faster if I was solely focused on providing real value to others and creating a situation where I was giving them abundance instead of trying to close deals and trying to get out of the mud, so to speak. I think that whether you're trying to sell a product or a service or trying to become a social influencer or anything like that, thinking about the quality, I had a guy come to me a couple of weeks ago, and he's starting a new podcast, and he's like, how do I make this go viral? And he's already talking about monetization, hasn't started yet. And I'm like, look, dude, I like to have, a good idea of how we're going to do these things. But honestly, right now, focus on quality and giving your guests the absolute most amazing experience possible. And then when people do chime in and try to interact, connect with those people and talk to them, right? That's the key always, I think, to success is focusing on the quality and providing abundance. And the success comes for sure. But in the beginning, you don't fully have that faith. So there's this balancing act of focusing on the money versus the impact. And it draws out your timeline to success. So.
How do you, I mentioned in the intro, serial entrepreneur. When, there's different kinds,
Yeah, sure.
My buddy Camden's uncle Ben, he's a serial entrepreneur, and one of those guys that, gets his business to point X and then it's like, yeah, that's not so much fun anymore. On to the next, sells it, moves on to the next. What's kind of your, I guess, metric, probably a good way of putting it, that you use because you've had so many businesses that you follow or whatever to, hey, I'm tired of this.
Yeah,
one.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's always that point where you get a little disenchanted, like you fall out of love. That can definitely happen. But I'll say, I think there's two types of people, just to make things really simple. I think you have rainmakers that are these dynamic people that get out there and people listen to them. They have very high on the leadership scale. They know how to create a synergy. They can get people in a room and create a synergy where people will even bite off and sign on as, follow the direction. Typically, those rainmaker, very extrovert, dynamic frontmen or women type people, they're really good at the vision and bringing everything together and really getting everybody to kind of sign off on it and start the momentum. And they're good at bringing the company into fruition about 10%. Once you pass that kind of startup kind of, first part, and it becomes a little bit more mundane, they're not the greatest executors. They become bored. They just get distracted. They want to do something else. The excitement is kind of gone, right? The honeymoon's over, so to speak, and they want to look at something else. And then I think you have generals that are a little bit more analytical and very methodical, and maybe they don't have the big vision to make millions, but they're kind of like, show me what to do and I'll do it. Just show me one time and train me. And they love that whole every day in, day out, just executing. And so you have to know which side of the fence that you're on. I started off, most people would think I'm more of a rainmaker, but honestly, I started off as a general behind the scenes of other people. And then over time, now in my career, over the last, say, 15 years, I've had to play the other role more where I'm out front. So I can execute. I'm decent at executing, but while I'm executing, I'm not doing the vision part. Like, you have to pick which side you're on. And one's not better than the other. They're both absolutely necessary. So now what I'll do is I'll create, I might be insane, but I like startups. I like being involved. I think it's exciting and fun. But I'll get it organized. I'll get things moving. I'll build it to where the framework of the infrastructure is there with a clear vision. And I'll start the execution. I'll bring it back into like 10%. And then I pass it off to other people to do the work. The other thing is at this point is more investing. So I was on a show recently and they asked me, what's the difference between a small business owner and an entrepreneur? The host said, I've owned a business for years, but I've never really as an entrepreneur. Is there a difference? And I said, yeah, the difference is at the end of the day, a small business owner builds a job, right? He's first one in, last one to leave, pays himself last, looks for what's my margin after everything's taken care of. And he's built himself into the machine. So that person can hardly ever leave because they have duties. If he's doing 7 or 8 things a day and he wants to go to the Bahamas for 2 weeks, there's 7 things a day times 14 that's not getting done. He's going to come back to so many fires. He's going to have to go from operations to firefighter, right? And pick up all the broken pieces from all the plates he was spinning. Whereas an entrepreneur, we're not afraid to get our hands dirty and get in the trenches with the men. But from day one, we're thinking about putting processes and systems in place to where we're not going to be doing the work. I don't mind developing a few people to show them how to do it. And it might take me a few months to do that. But at the end of the day, we know going in that we're going to work on the business, not in the business, right? Now, an investor is even the next level. I don't want to work on a business at this point or even in a business unless I'm just extremely passionate about some idea I have. I just want my money to work on that business. So now we'll invest and we want our money to go, you don't have to feed it. It doesn't sleep. It's working 24/7 and it's having babies. That's kind of the ideal situation for us now. But 2-3 times a year, I do get a wild hair and an idea of something I want to create, and I'll build a business and I'll develop people and kind of bring it to about 10%, 15% and pass it. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of those that are still running successfully.
What's flashing in my head when you talked about that shifting to the investor is because I think there's a lot of folks out there that kind of that get the idea from Shark Tank, right? And one of the big things in Shark Tank is Mr. Wonderful will always say, hey, if you take my deal, I'll be part of your team, which is really kind of different than what you're describing. So, would you call that a transition point, or is that just a hobby, have that, I want to give back, be the advisor sort of thing too? How does that come into play?
Well, I've said that myself many times. Hey, if we do this deal, I'm going to be on your team. I don't think it means that Mr. Wonderful's, in the trenches doing the work. He makes 5 phone calls and gets them into all the broad distribution everywhere. And he has a certain leverage position and level of influence that being on the team, his name being associated with it is going to open all the doors, and he might have to make 5 calls. So I think it's more of an advisory position. I have a lot of good offers on a regular basis where people will give me equity in their company just to be an advisor. Like, hey, be a part of my team and we'll give you 15% of the company. And these aren't startups. They're successful companies that are bringing in millions of dollars. But my first question is, what is that going to entail for me in terms of workload, right? Because honestly, our biggest commodity is our time. And if I'm putting in more than half hour a week, 2 hours a month, I have to be out, no matter what the opportunity is. So I think it's more of an influence and making sure that they're attached to something that's going to open the right doors.
Yeah, but you're spot on that board of advisory thing. I've been involved in a couple of those, and it's like, why are you calling me again? Because I didn't set the good boundaries early on. early on, it's, hey, Otis, we want you to be, on our board, da, 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 da. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm honored. So what do? You dive into it, and the next thing you know, you're spending, 7-8 hours a week.
10 emails every night coming into your inbox. It's like, oh my God.
What am I signed up for?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we got to be careful of those. So, yeah. I know you do a lot in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
Is that just kind of a derivative of the seminar business? Because, kind of you had your own show for a while and things like that, but, or is it just something that's, I'm curious about this and I just want to jump into it.
Yeah, a lot of the opportunities in my like the television stuff and all that, it came out of the seminar business. Because so we had our own lineup and we were doing 2 cities a week, 45 weeks a year. I mean, it was a very organized kind of deal. And when you're on the stage like that, a lot of people want you to coach them, right? Be their mentor or provide coaching. So, that you wind up building a coaching business as well. And then you got to figure out, most people kind of support their habit when it comes to speakers. I think one of the big downfalls of the speaking in the seminar world, and I got great advice early on from a guy named Peter Lowell, but he told me 1% of the seminar business controls the other 99% of the seminar business. Because people just want to show up and speak, but they don't want to fill the room. They don't want to do that. That's the hard part. So I remember the first seminar that I organized, I was really into reading like Brian Tracy and Les Brown, and those were the guys, Zig Ziglar, I grew up reading, right? And I wanted to hire Les Brown, and his keynote was $50,000 for 90 minutes to give a keynote. And I called him and I said, hey, Les, I know your thing is 50 grand, but we'd love to have you speak on my lineup, blah, blah, blah. But I don't have 50 grand, but I can pay you 2 grand. But I'll guarantee we'll have about 1,000 people there. And he goes, 1,000 people, you sure? I said, yeah. He goes, can I bring my books and set up a table to sell my products? I said, yeah, absolutely. He's like, can you cover the hotel and airline? I'm like, yeah. He goes, all right. So I got him for like total of like $3,000 as opposed to 50, because people don't want to fill the room. They just want to show up and speak. And he's not dumb. He knows the power of being in front of an audience and the leverage to sell his products. And so very early on, I learned the recipe of how to fill a room. And that really helped me. But the seminar business, most things come out of it. So, at one time I did a show on ABC. That was because after a seminar, one of the guys was like, hey, dude, you should be on TV. And many of the things that I was able to do after that came out of the seminar business for sure. So I vet every individual thing on a yes or no, risk reward ratio. Like, yeah, that one's a good risk, that one's not. But it definitely kind of gives you a lot more deal flow, so to speak, to look at.
So I had a connection that I made earlier talking about the the entrepreneur versus the business owner, and I could even see it in the other projects you're talking about, Dan. It makes me think of some of the things I've been involved with. When you talk about being passionate about an idea, for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's the fire. It's the passion about the idea and solving the problem. Then there's always this metaphor of like the business and the business partners being like marriage. I don't know how I'd never put this together before, but you hear the fallout of love with the business. You also will hear people fall out of love in relationships. And I've heard the hormones, the love hormones. It's like 18 months, 24 years, 18 months, 24 months, something like that. Sure. It's supposed to be how long the love hormone lasts. And if you're over 2 years, then it's like, okay, then it's not just the hormones, it's actually, love for that person. I'm curious how much truth do you think that has in the entrepreneurial space? I've never made that connection before, but I could see that same type of a thing where it's basically you got the love hormones for this idea, and then eventually it's just like, spark's not there anymore.
I think it's 100% accurate. If you think about a relationship of two people that are in love, they may be in love, but there's also some, there's a lot of emotion there, and they're kind of going in, they're thinking that like the dating phase is what they're getting into, right? And of course, after about, and there's a lot of infatuation there, even though they may actually be in love. But after, a year or so, 18 months, 24 months, couple of years, the honeymoon's over, so to speak. And now it's this reality of like, baby, what happened to all the sexy underwear you used to wear? Like, why did we have these? Or, hey, she's saying, well, what happened to all these things that you used to do for me? Bring me flowers and do these things, right? And we're more into the rhythm of the day to day. And so we kind of fell in love with this idea. And now that there's work involved, right? And same with the business. I think we fall in love with this idea. We have this vision, and we're very passionate, and the team's excited. In the beginning of a startup, everybody's really excited. But after you kind of get things settled down, and you're past that startup phase, and you're now into the mundane day-to-days, that's the part that they don't acclimate. They don't change with it and pivot. They just want the old feelings, but they're not now adapting to the work at hand. And I always looked at it like, look, this part's not as fun as the early on days, but it's progression forward. It's the only way forward is through. So I have to go ahead and through this mundane phase. But most people stay there forever. They just keep coming into work day in, day out, doing these things. I would do it and say, what's the fastest way I can develop people to do this? So it never lasted longer than maybe 6 months or a year for me to do that hard part, because I'm in the people business, man. I'm developing people, which is really the only effective way we can clone ourselves. So I think that's the problem, is in a business, we're not replicating ourselves. And so that mundane time lasts so long that we just become disenchanted, for sure.
And to take the analogy or metaphor, sorry, don't have the answer on this one, Dad. You're always asking me which one's which. But to take it to the next level there, then also I think that's, if you're in your first business and you get through that that honeymoon phase with your business,
sure,
that's the realization of, it's like, all right, hey, just like a marriage, as I gesture broadly towards my wife, just like a marriage, sure. It's, hey, do I want to stay in this thing after that, the hormones are gone, or do I want to go chase that next project? And I think it's just the same in the business of, do I want to stick with this? Is this the idea that I want to spend my life building up? Or did I love it and it was great, but I want to get someone else in charge of it and go on to the next idea? And so, yeah, I mean, gosh, that analogy really, there's a reason people talk about businesses and business relationships being like marriage. So the more we talk through it, the more that's making a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. I this September I'll be married 22 years. And so certainly in 22 years, there's going to be some periods that it's rough. There's a lot of work, right? But I think that a lot of it is the mindset too, and I'm not judging anybody or telling anybody how to believe, but me personally, going into my marriage, I had a talk with my wife or my future wife to be at the time. And I said, look, the way I believe is, I don't believe in divorce. So this thing, no matter how rocky it gets, we're going to do the work. Are you in, but some people will say, well, look, let's get married. If it doesn't work, they already have that out, right? I think it's exactly the same in business. When I start something, I'm like, look, no matter how bad this gets, I'm going to make it work. I'm going to keep pivoting until I find that recipe for success. But I think a lot of people going in are like, when it gets tough, they're like, man, I don't know, this seems easier over here, my friend's doing this, and maybe I'm going to jump ship. It's a different, they don't have the level of commitment. Right. And I think too, some of us that have been in relationships, you have that honeymoon phase where everything's magical. Then there's a lot of work phase, especially when you're building and your finances aren't right. It's that stress, you're going to project it into other areas of your relationship. Right. But then if you really do the work, you can get to this place again where, like, me and my wife now are kind of dating again and going on dates, and we're having tons of fun. I think it's the same with businesses. You got to get through that area. You got to develop people, and you got to get the processes and systems in place. And then eventually the goal is to get to a place where it's spinning off cash and passive income, and you're not doing the work, and it's fun again. But I never get to the point of my business where I hate it, but there's a time where I'm like, I like it. I don't love it right now, but I know the love's coming again if I do the work.
That's a great point. And I think that's a great driver. I'm also laughing, and maybe it's maybe it's my point in life, my season in life, but I never looked at that business phase really as the honeymoon phase. I look at it as the kitchen table phase. So what does that say about my marriage? Yeah. Miss Suzanne, I'm sorry. I'll buy some flowers later.
I want to call her after this, Otis. I want to find her.
I do get in trouble a lot of times on these shows, but you know, that phase, what's amazing about that is that there are these cycles, and you hit the nail on the head. And if you look at the hard part, the sludge, the mud, the dragging it through, and you know that and truly believe that we can get through this period of our business, this period of our relationship, this period of our life, because I know it's going to get better by doing these things. That's the difference. And that's what makes businesses successful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sure you learned this from all your years in the military, but you have a plan, but the plan doesn't go exactly the way you lay it out. There's always going to be last minute changes and pivots and on the fly kind of things to do in order to survive, right? And so just not going in with rose-colored glasses on a startup and saying, look, this is going to be, you know, the wheels are going to come off at some point and all hell's going to break loose, and that's fine. But I'm not going to jump ship. I'm just going to refine my process, tweak it a little bit, and then move it forward. Refine, tweak, and move. Refine, tweak, and move. You have to constantly do that. And, you know, there's always going to be hurdles and obstacles. And it doesn't matter how successful we are, what we're dealing with. Life happens to everybody, man. You know, just this morning, I'm not wearing sunglasses right now to be cool. I woke up with my eyes swollen shut. And I called my doctor and explained it, and I have a cyst behind my eye. I said, oh, not serious in the last few days, but I'm like, oh, great. The morning of my show, you just have to roll with it, man. Things are going to happen. Life happens to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You know, you can allow those things to shut you down, you know, call up, cancel, curl up in the bed, whatever you want to, however you want to put it, or you just say, well, let me just adjust off of that and make the best of it. So, what I wanted to do, and this is tough. This is a tough question. Is what's the soundbite advice to, and we'll play the niche game, and you know, that veteran who's soon to be veteran is getting out of the service that wants to start a business. What's the you know, that I'll just call it soundbite advice that you could give him or her as they take the uniform off and go, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah. You know, we live in such an amazing time right now, because just 15 years ago, maybe even 10, we were stuck to a proximity. We had to kind of do things that where we perceived opportunity to be. So right now, for instance, I have a lot of people that I know that are saying, man, you can't find any good helpers right now. Everybody's understaffed. Nobody wants to work. These young millennials and Z, they don't want to work. They're lazy, and no one's wanting to do this. That's actually not true. Here's really why people are understaffed right now. There's a variable they're not looking at. And that is, prior to COVID, entrepreneurs were already online. We were doing a large percentage of our business online. But you have the brick and mortars, particularly service industry. Their whole thing was location and proximity, right? Well, when COVID happened, it forced the last bunch of people to have to do at least a portion of their business online, right? Or to acclimate to drive-through only, right? Whatever it was. And what they found is a lot of them pivoted correctly, and they said, oh my God, we're not going to die. We didn't die. In fact, not only can we survive, but we can be highly profitable and thrive and have better margins, right? So now, particularly in the last 2 years, there's 10,000 opportunities every month, 10,000 opportunities online of how to make $1,000 a week or more, right? And some of those opportunities are significantly more. So Generation X, you know, our parents were the boomers, right? And the boomers' advice was, you have to, you know, be a grinder, work hard. It was all about working hard, right? Generation X was, hey man, we were the educators, right? Hey, we're going to go to college and get a degree so we don't have to do this and we don't have to survive. We want to thrive. We were all about getting the degree, learning a trade, kind of the advice my dean gave me. And but today, I think that for the first time, younger people are saying, we're not going to go do something just because we have to go get a paycheck. We're going to hold our ground and do something that we like. And we're going to force that stuff to come to us. And the world has caught up to them now where it actually can facilitate their needs. And you can sit in your living room in your pajamas and make $10,000 a month. And so for the veteran that's thinking about going and starting a business, first of all, don't do something because you perceive it to be a way to take care of your family. We used to do that, and certainly our priority is taking care of our families. But sometimes we'll actually become a sacrificial lamb. And I felt that way before, where it's like, hey, baby, we know what this is. I know what my role is. I got to go do this thing because I know I got to take care of the family. And we kind of sacrifice living to where we're almost just existing and playing a role, right? And so I would say find something that you're highly passionate about and then figure out a way to monetize that, because the world allows you to do it today. We have the technology where you actually can, for the first time, realistically do it quite simply. The other thing I would say is, find a good mentor. Used to, back in the day, you had to go out and meet people and shake hands and try to ask people to be your mentor. But today we live in such an instant, transparent world. You think about the top 1%ers of any industry. They're writing books, they're starting podcasts, they're online, they're putting out content. So it's really easy to identify, whatever field we land in, who the top 1 or 2%ers are, and then spend $300 going to find their content and learning from them. It's pretty simple to do.
So I had one more question in the marriage business analogy, because I'm having way too much fun with that. I wrote this one down. So I heard this interesting thought once, and I'm not in an arranged marriage. I don't know anyone in one, but they were talking about how it can be successful compared to other marriages because they're using marriage as the commitment device. It is just the institution of marriage that's holding it together, compared to, Dan, like you were saying, of the folks who are, it's like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll get divorced. It's using the institution as the commitment device, and that's what, creates that success. So I want to throw it over to you, Dan. What is the equivalent of that commitment device in business that, gets you all bought in so that you're not going to just, jump out when it gets bad?
So there's a couple of things that can serve as that. What I find is, if you're a solopreneur, which really a solopreneur in my mind is a small business owner, because you're a one-man band, you're an island. It's really not entrepreneurship, because you have to be working in the business, you're not working on it, right? So if you're a solopreneur, it's really easy to quit, because there's no accountability. When you have 4 or 5 partners, there's much more committal, and you're thinking about their families. It's bigger than you now. So that's really going to hold you in. The other thing I think is, if you think about going towards success, most people go towards success in a very linear way, right? So I'm going to make $5,000 a month, and I'm going to try to make $8,000 a month, $10,000. I'm going to try to grow my leads, maybe hire someone, build right? They're working success in a very linear way. And we even do that with our debts. As soon as I pay off the blah, 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 I'm going to get a new car. As soon as this, but life gets in the way, where the washing machine breaks down, this happens, that, but we never make it, right? Or in our business, we're going this way, and then all of a sudden a law changes, or an 08 happens, or a COVID shows up. It's a difficult thing. So what I find is, instead of working towards success linearly and letting all those external environments kind of wreak havoc on me, I would rather rely on a human's ability to acclimate. Our ability to acclimate as humans is unbelievable. So what I'll do is, that other contractual thing to hold me in, is I'll commit first to something big. So I might spend the money on something that I don't, and maybe you didn't have the money, but you spend it anyways, because now you don't want to get it done. You have to. So I think if you're working off a checklist, let's say, and there's 10 things on your list every day that you're trying to get done when you go into your office, maybe there's 4 or 5 things on that list that you want to get done, there's a few things on that list that you really need to get done. But what I've noticed is people they'll have micro improvements, but we never have a complete metamorphosis, like where you completely in a big way until you have to. So I look at my list, I have 10 things. Some of them are want to get done. Some of them are need to get done. My guys are coming and say, Dan, you really need to try to get this done today. I'm like, yeah. But I know there's 4 things on that list that I have to get done, right? So I'd like to say different, but I know for a fact I'm going to get those 3-4 things done before I leave the office. And then I'll try to work on the needs to stuff. And I'm probably never going to get to the want to get done until they become have tos. And that's just the way people are. So what I'll do is I'll take the commitment first. I'll create a situation that moves me from my list of want to or need to have to, and then rely on my ability to acclimate to the situation at hand instead of attacking it from a linear fashion. That will definitely make you stick.
I love it.
Sorry, I was making a mic adjustment. I realized late in the show, I gotta make a mic adjustment. How about that? Hey, no, man, amazing stuff, Dan. And as I feared, with having you on the show is like, crap, what is my one thing that I learned? Because we could do another 20, 30 minutes of me listing out the things I learned today. But I'm going to
want me to just read my notes. Is that
just regurgitate the notes that we, but man, I had one. All right. I'm going to stick with that one. I'm going to stick with, Mr. Watson taught me in social studies in 7th grade, go with your first answer if you're not sure on multiple choice tests. And I've used that a lot, and it's worked so far most of the time, except the SAT. But that's a whole other story. But for me today, it was that success comes in seasons. And I think that's such an integral part of our lives that we really have to understand. And I talk with a lot of people. As a matter of fact, I was talking with somebody yesterday that just didn't understand the whole seasons of life thing, and that it was okay to have these changes, and okay that, you'd been doing this and now it doesn't feel like it's right anymore. And that's those seasons in life, and how our success comes in those seasons. And I've always loved that term of seasons, because, here in Colorado, it's spring on the calendar from March till June. That doesn't mean it's really spring, because it's a transition of the season. And some days it's 70 degrees, some days it's snowing. So yeah. I always loved that. So Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Are you saying that entrepreneurs like myself in Arizona are going to be more successful because there's no seasons here? It's just summer. So we're always successful.
Because you have one season hot.
Exactly. No, what I learned, and this, Dan, you said this early on, and this is like many things we say in the What We Learned part of the show. It's a reiteration, but it's make up your own mind and stick to it. Just how important it is that, like, once you assess the situation and you make that decision, just stick to it, go all in on it, and don't worry about what other people are thinking, because you're going to be making those changes. And, sometimes people get left behind, and it's not because there's no love for those people, or, you don't care about them or anything like that. It's more so that that's not the path right now. And if you can calculate out that decision and realize what's the smartest choice, then stick to it.
Yeah, I've actually had to caution people. I do this on a regular basis, because everybody tells me it's about impact. It's not about the money, it's about impact. It's just, we want to impact people, help people. I get it. Of course, it should always be about people first. We want to be others focused, and we want to make an impact. But I've cautioned a lot of entrepreneurs. I said, look, let me ask you a question right now. How many people are you actually impacting? 5, 10, 15, maybe in your local community? Mm-hmm. I've actually had to caution them, to tell them, look, for 1 year, I'm going to ask you to not do that and maybe focus a little bit more on yourself, because helping those 10 people right now is literally what's prohibiting you from helping thousands or potentially millions. You don't have the resources to help more than 10 people right now. And right now, that time needs to be focused on getting your feet planted, getting the right processes and systems in place, so you can have the appropriate resources to be able to expand your impact. So I'm like, look, I love what you're doing, and I love where it's coming from, the heart, but you're helping 5 people. Like, let's focus on you for 1 year, get your resources in order so we can expand that impact.
Great. Dan, how about you? What'd you learn?
I learned, I've talked about this here and there, but when we were talking about the correlation between a business and a marriage, it really kind of clicked for me actually how similar those two things are. And again, sometimes we become a little, we go into a situation with rose-colored glasses, but then when the work starts, we underestimate largely the amount of work it's going to take. Let's say particularly on a startup. And just like a marriage, you have to think about what your resolve is, and you have to constantly do the work and keep showing up. And so I really took that point away. I'm going to work up a bit probably about it and have it on my next curriculum.
All right.
So thank you.
Marriage counseling for your business. There we go.
That's right.
Love
Write it down.
So Dan, how can folks follow you, get in touch with you, see what you got going on?
Man, let me think about that. So I don't do a ton on social media, to be honest with you. I just don't want to. I know it's a big part of people's recipe, but when you think about influence, we automatically think about social influence and being connected to thousands of people on the front lines. I don't want that disruptive lifestyle. So I would rather, my business doesn't afford me to have to be, have a presence on social media. I'd say the best way is there's a site, Dan Vega Dan Vega Business. Mm-hmm. There's a website, and I have a lot of emails, but an email is, I guess, Dan Vega International at Gmail. Just mm-hmm. Pick one. People can figure out what I'm doing, but if they just search my name, they'll be able to connect with me quite easily.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your time, man. This has been great. Camden, run us out, please.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam Otis Show. And a special thanks to our guest, Dan Vega, for joining us today. And of course, our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. Get started for free today at findyourpurpose.coach. Make sure to follow the Cam Otis Show on Instagram and Facebook. And please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Videos of the podcast are on our YouTube page, and you can always get a full archive of our episode at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.